In June of 1990, Vince Coleman stole the 500th base of his major league career. He had reached that number in only 804 games, faster than anyone in baseball history. Then he left St. Louis for a 4-year, $11.95 million contract with the New York Mets. Over the next 3 seasons, Coleman appeared in just 235 of a possible 486 games. Injuries and suspensions kept him out of the lineup. Conflicts followed him inside the clubhouse. One incident in Los Angeles left 3 children injured. By the end of 1993, the Mets had decided he would not return. This was a player who had made baseball history almost from the moment he arrived. His speed had not been a one-season novelty, and the record would later show that it had not simply vanished. So what happened to Vince Coleman after St. Louis? How did the fastest beginning of any base stealer's career lead so quickly to missed games, damaged trust, and a long search for one more stable place in the major leagues? To answer that, it helps to understand that Coleman's speed was established long before the country knew his name. He grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, attended William M. Raines High School, and went on to Florida A&M in Tallahassee. There, Coleman was building 2 possible athletic careers at the same time. In football, he kicked and punted for the Rattlers. His cousin, Greg Coleman, had played the same position at Florida A&M before beginning a 12-year career in the National Football League.
Vince was part of Florida A&M's 1978 Division I AA championship team. He earned all-conference recognition in 1980 and 1981, and in 1979 he kicked a game-winning 34-yard field goal in a 16-13 upset of the Miami Hurricanes. Baseball, though, offered an even clearer view of what made him different. In 1981, Coleman stole 7 bases in 1 game and 65 over the season. He led NCAA Division I in both total steals and stolen base percentage. Those numbers mattered because they showed 2 sides of the same skill. He was running often, and he was succeeding often enough to justify it. The Philadelphia Phillies selected him in the 20th round of the 1981 draft, but he did not sign. In 1982, Coleman briefly entered professional football instead, joining Washington as a free agent. The team wanted to convert him from a specialist into a wide receiver. Coleman left training camp after 1 week. That same year, the St. Louis Cardinals drafted him in the 10th round. Baseball now had his full attention, and Coleman began forcing the organization to notice him. With the Macon Redbirds in 1983, he stole 145 bases, even though a broken hand cost him a month of the season. In 1984, he stole another 101 for AAA Louisville. Across those 2 minor league seasons alone, Coleman had taken 246 bases. Whatever was about to happen in St. Louis had already been rehearsed on minor league diamonds throughout the Cardinals system. He made his major league debut on April 18, 1985, against Montreal.
In his first game, he collected a hit and stole 2 bases. Then he kept running. Coleman stole 110 bases as a rookie. That was more than a remarkable debut. It was the 9th highest single-season total in Major League history. For a Cardinals team headed to the postseason, every walk, single, or error that put Coleman on first could immediately change the shape of an inning. The pitcher had another problem to manage. The catcher had another clock to beat. The defense had to prepare for a runner who could turn 1 base into 3. Coleman became the National League Rookie of the Year, only the 4th unanimous selection in the award's history. By the end of 1986, his second season, he already had 217 stolen bases. Within the Cardinals' record book, that put him behind only Lou Brock, and Coleman was nowhere near finished. He stole 107 bases in 1986, then 109 in 1987.
No other player in the 20th century produced 3 consecutive 100 steal seasons. Coleman was also the first major leaguer ever to reach 100 in each of his first 3 years. Those totals can make the accomplishment sound almost mechanical. It was anything but. Every steal required another attempt, another read, another acceleration toward a bag where the ball might already be waiting. To reach 100 once demanded an entire season of pressure on pitchers and catchers. Coleman crossed that line 3 years in a row. His first season also brought an early reminder of how quickly all that movement could be stopped.
It was October 1985 at Busch Stadium in St. Louis, before Game 4 of the National League Championship Series. The Cardinals were playing the Los Angeles Dodgers, and Coleman was stretching as part of his routine. Busch Stadium was still the enclosed, multi-purpose bowl of that era, its rows of red seats rising above an artificial surface built for both baseball and football. Before the game, the automatic tarp began moving across the field. There was the sound of the mechanism, the broad sheet rolling over the turf, and players preparing for a postseason game around it. Then the machine rolled over Coleman's leg. The runner who had stolen 110 bases was suddenly unable to play. His postseason was over before the Cardinals had completed the championship series. St. Louis advanced without him, then lost a 7-game World Series to Kansas City. For fans who lived through that October, the memory may begin with the sheer strangeness of it. The most dangerous runner in the National League, removed from the postseason by the machinery of his own ballpark. A season shaped by Coleman's legs had turned on an accident during stretching. The injury did not derail his regular season career. He returned in 1986 and again led the league in steals. But it took away his first chance to show what his speed might do across a full postseason. He received another chance in 1987, the best season of his major league career. Coleman batted .289 with a .363 on-base percentage. He collected 180 hits, scored 121 runs, and stole 109 bases. 13 times that season, he stole both second and third in the same inning. He was not simply accumulating steals after games had been decided. He was moving himself into scoring position, sometimes taking 2 bases before the hitter at the plate had finished his work. The Cardinals returned to the World Series, this time against Minnesota. Coleman struggled at the plate, batting .143, but he still reached base 6 times and stole 6 bases without being caught. In Game 7 at the Metrodome, he contributed in a different way. Coleman threw out 2 runners at home plate, becoming the first outfielder to record 2 assists at the plate in one World Series game. Even then, the Cardinals lost the game and the championship. It would be Coleman's only World Series appearance. By the end of 1987, his place in baseball history was already secure. He had also become part of a separate and more uncomfortable public story. During the 1985 postseason, shortly after Rachel Robinson threw a ceremonial first pitch, a reporter asked Coleman about Jackie Robinson's legacy. Coleman answered, "I don't know nothing about him. Why are you asking me about Jackie Robinson?" When Rachel Robinson learned of the response, she said, "I hope somehow he'll learn and be embarrassed by his own ignorance." Coleman still received the unanimous Rookie of the Year vote that offseason. 2 years later, Major League Baseball officially renamed that honor the Jackie Robinson Award. The record does not connect Coleman's comment to what happened later in his career, and it should not be used as an explanation for his decline. It does show that public acclaim arrived alongside an early controversy, and that Coleman's emergence carried historical expectations beyond what he did between first and second base.
On the field, he continued to run at a level almost no one could match. Coleman led the National League in stolen bases in each of his 6 seasons with St. Louis, from 1985 through 1990. Only Ricky Henderson, Luis Aparicio, and Maury Wills have also led their leagues in 6 consecutive seasons. From September 1988 into the summer of 1989, Coleman successfully stole 50 consecutive bases without being caught, a major league record. The streak carried him to Olympic Stadium in Montreal in late July 1989. Under the roof of the immense concrete stadium, on its artificial surface, the contest narrowed to 1 runner, 1 catcher, and 1 throw. Coleman broke for the next base. Montreal catcher Nelson Santovenia responded, and this time the ball won the race. The tag ended the streak at 50. 1 caught stealing could not diminish what had happened before it. Coleman had attempted 50 consecutive steals without allowing a defense to record a single out against him. The streak represented more than speed.
It reflected timing, judgment, and the ability to repeat an advantage after every opponent knew it was coming. Coleman reached his 500th career steal the following year. At 804 games, nobody had arrived there sooner. He was also headed toward free agency at exactly the right time. Coleman was 29 years old, a 2-time All-Star, and still the National League's stolen base leader. His Cardinals tenure had not ended with a long statistical fade. The central evidence points in the opposite direction. He left St. Louis after 6 consecutive league titles in the skill that defined him. The Mets were buying that record when they gave him nearly $12 million over 4 years. They were also placing Coleman in a new setting, with the expectations of a major contract and a club seeking to turn individual talent into a winning team. The second act began with considerable promise on paper. It quickly became much harder to keep on the field. Across the 1991, 1992, and 1993 seasons, Coleman played only 235 of the Mets' 486 games. Injuries and suspensions accounted for much of the lost time. A player's value begins with availability, and Coleman was absent for more than half of the schedule during those 3 years. There were problems even when he was running. His base-stealing decisions became increasingly suspect. According to the record, he sometimes ignored or misinterpreted signs from his coaches. For a player whose greatest weapon depended on reading situations correctly, that was a serious change. Pure speed could survive a missed sign. Trust between a runner and the people directing the offense was harder to preserve. The friction became visible. In August 1991, Coleman argued with coach Mike Cubbage. In September 1992, he fought with manager Jeff Torborg and received a 2-game suspension. These incidents did not prove that every problem in New York came from Coleman, nor does the source provide enough detail to reconstruct every dispute. Together, however, they show an increasingly damaged working relationship between the player and the organization. Public scrutiny surrounded the team as well. Coleman was one of 3 Mets named in a sexual assault complaint filed by a 31-year-old woman in Florida. Prosecutors did not pursue charges. That limit is essential. The complaint is part of the documented public environment around Coleman's Mets years, but the available record does not establish criminal guilt and cannot support one. By 1993, the breakdown had moved beyond missed games and arguments. In April, Coleman injured teammate Dwight Gooden's arm while carelessly swinging a golf club in the Mets clubhouse. The event was another blow to confidence inside a team already struggling with its own identity. 3 months later came the incident that changed the stakes completely. It happened in Los Angeles, outside Dodger Stadium.
Fans were gathered in the parking lot, waiting for autographs. Beyond the stadium's pale concrete and sweeping roofline, The vast parking areas spread across the hilltop, their asphalt holding the noise and movement of people leaving the ballpark. Coleman threw a lit firecracker into the crowd. The explosion broke through the parking lot noise. There was the sharp report, smoke near the waiting fans, and the immediate confusion that follows when a crowd realizes people have been hurt. 3 children suffered injuries. 1 was 2 years old. Coleman was charged with endangerment. He was found guilty and ordered to complete 200 hours of community service. The Mets suspended him with pay. The consequences now extended far beyond his batting average or stolen base total. Children waiting for autographs had been injured. Coleman faced a criminal judgment. The Mets had to decide whether he could remain part of their organization. On August 26, the team supplied its answer. As part of a broader clubhouse housecleaning, the Mets announced that Coleman would not return the following season. Manager Dallas Green acknowledged that Coleman had played well, but said he did not have the head and heart and belly Green wanted on the team. That was one manager's assessment, rather than an objective measurement of Coleman's character. It was also unmistakable evidence of how far the relationship had deteriorated.
3 years after signing him to a 4-year contract, the Mets no longer trusted him as part of their future. At the end of the 1993 season, New York sent Coleman and cash to the Kansas City Royals for Kevin McReynolds. It is tempting to stop the investigation there and conclude that Coleman's career ended because his greatest ability had deserted him. Kansas City complicates that answer. Across 179 games as a Royal, Coleman was credited with 76 stolen bases. The pace no longer resembled those astonishing first 3 years in St. Louis, but it was still substantial major league production. A runner whose speed had completely disappeared could not have done it. The Kansas City evidence changes the interpretation. The Mets' years were not a simple story of physical decline. Coleman's availability had been damaged by injuries and suspensions. His standing had been weakened by disputed decisions on the bases, conflicts with team personnel, and documented conduct that carried public and legal consequences. Those factors accumulated until the organization chose to move on. Yet the signature skill remained usable. That did not produce a stable recovery. Kansas City traded Coleman to Seattle in the middle of 1995. In 1996, he moved to Cincinnati, where the Reds released him in June. He signed with the California Angels, but never appeared in a major league game for them. Detroit gave him another opportunity in 1997.
By then, Coleman was 35, receiving limited playing time and producing little. His final major league appearance came on April 14 against Milwaukee. He had 1 at-bat, made an out, and did not steal a base. There was no grand farewell and no postseason stage. A career that had begun with a hit and 2 steals ended with a single unsuccessful at-bat in the second week of a season. Coleman still made one more attempt to return. In 1998, he went back to the organization where his major league career had begun. With the Cardinals in spring training, he batted .313. St. Louis did not place him on the opening day roster and instead assigned him to AAA Memphis. For anyone who remembered the Cardinals of the 1980s, the contrast was difficult to miss. Coleman had once reached base at Busch Stadium and made an entire defense tighten around the possibility that he might run. Now he was trying to reach St. Louis from the minor leagues at 36 years old. He continued to produce in Memphis. In 20 games, Coleman batted .316, reached base at a .395 rate, and stole 8 bases. Those numbers came in a small sample at AAA, and they do not prove that he would have succeeded over another major league season. They do show that he had not returned merely as a ceremonial name from the past. A prompt promotion did not come. In May, Coleman chose to leave the team. But leaving Memphis was not the end of Coleman's connection to the game. Years after his last attempt to return as a player, baseball began calling on him for something different, to teach the skill that had once made him singular. In 2014, Coleman coached for the Single-A Quad Cities River Bandits. The Chicago White Sox hired him as a base-running instructor for the 2015 season, and the San Francisco Giants brought him in as a roving minor league base-running and outfield coach in 2017. He also coached at the HBCU Swingman Classic during Major League Baseball's All-Star Weekend, returning to a setting connected to the historically black college tradition from which his own career had emerged at Florida A&M. It is a familiar passage far beyond baseball. Time eventually takes away the chance to perform at the highest level, but experience can still have value when it is handed to someone coming next. Coleman could no longer change a major league game with his legs. Organizations still believed that what he knew about running, timing, and the outfield was worth teaching. That later chapter adds another dimension to the record, even as the central question remains what ended his own time as an everyday major leaguer. The historical record allows a firm answer to part of the question, and only a cautious one to the rest. Vince Coleman's career did not change because his speed disappeared immediately after St. Louis. His production in Kansas City and even the smaller final sample in Memphis prevents that conclusion.
He remained able to steal bases after the Mets had moved on from him. The clearest break occurred during his 3 seasons in New York. Injuries and suspensions severely reduced his availability. Problems with signs and decisions weakened confidence in his base running. Arguments with coaches and managers damaged working relationships. The golf club incident injured a teammate, and the Firecracker incident injured 3 children, produced a guilty finding and community service, and helped bring Coleman's relationship with the Mets to its end. Afterward, age, shorter opportunities, declining production, and repeated movement between organizations made a sustained comeback increasingly unlikely. The available source does not reveal exactly how each later club weighed his performance, health, reputation, and fit. It would be speculation to assign every roster decision to any one of those factors. What the numbers preserve is the full scale of the player Coleman had been. He finished with 752 stolen bases, 6th in Major League history through the end of the 2025 season. He owns 3 of the 6 highest single-season stolen base totals in the record cited here. He led the National League 6 years in a row, and no major leaguer since Coleman in 1987 has stolen 100 bases in a season. That final distinction has lasted far longer than his time at the top did.
Seasons changed, organizations changed, and the sport itself changed, but the line remained fixed at 100, with Vince Coleman still the last man across it. His career should be remembered with both sides intact. There was a sustained and historic peak, built from an ability already visible at Florida A&M and throughout the minor leagues. There was also a documented erosion of availability and trust in New York, followed by a series of opportunities too brief to restore what had been lost. In 1985, Coleman reached the majors and stole 2 bases in his first game. 13 years later, he was back in the Cardinals system, still hitting, still reaching base, still running, but waiting in Memphis for a promotion that never came. The speed survived longer than the career around it.